Hello again, bones and ghouls. Indieween continues. To celebrate the spooky season, I go and find a spooky indie game for every weekend of October, which when I combine the prices of all these games we play this month, it will be less than the cost of a single AAA title. Why? Because why not? What else are we gonna do now that games are pushing $70? Like I hinted last week, we're going to be going over a game that costs $9.99 and then a freebie to boot. Actually, I lied. We're doing 5 games today, one of which is free, 2 of which are $4.99 each, and the other 2 are $9.99 each. We're doing Fears to Fathom, the whole series. I originally was just going to do Ironbark Lookout when I got it, because I didn't realize that Fears to Fathom was a whole series with yearly installments, and after trying out the first one that was free, I was like, what the heck, we'll do them all. Fears to Fathom is a series by one Rail, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, which catalogs player-submitted stories about freaky stuff that's happened to them. There's a submission email on the main menu of all these games, and I'm not really one to say if this is legit or not, and I don't think it matters. What matters is that this is a series of non-supernatural horror experiences. It's more about the horror and the mundane things like being home alone or in an unfamiliar and secluded place. Being in a faraway place you're unfamiliar with can be stressful. You want to know what doesn't have to be stressful? Eating healthier, and more cost-effective too. And the best part is that meal prepping is an easy way to get more practice at not only your cooking, but also budgeting for meals and saving money on the drive-thru, which, man, I remember when the late-night munchie meal was the late-night $5 munchie meal. What happened to that? In order to help you all along with learning about meal prep, this month I've decided that we're going to do a mini cooking segment showcasing a meal prep recipe for every video, and that the standalone cooking segments with full recipes and in this case nutrition and cost breakdowns will be totally free for everyone. That's right, full recipes for free, just because I want to show you all that meal prep is easy and doable on a budget, and all you need is yourself and your confidence. Now let's get these games. Welcome to Fears to Fathom, Episode 1, Home Alone. You are a young lad who is home alone with their parents out on a business trip or something, and instead of murderous ingenuity, you have an insatiable appetite for lasagna. Jeez, this has got to be like at least 6,000 calories right here. Something the game isn't shy about telling you is that the experience is intended to only take 20 minutes. This is not exactly RPG levels of playtime, but the game wastes no time getting into it. You settle into your nightly routine, watch whatever the heck is going on with cable television these days while you shovel down lasagna, and then the spooky stuff hits like a truck. It's also worth noting that this is not the highest in fidelity. It uses the freeware version of Unity, complete with that old launcher that some of us are real familiar with if you've played a lot of small games. There's typos in the narration here and there, and there were a couple times I felt a little silly because I didn't quite hit a trigger to make the next thing happen and was just kind of sitting there waiting. There's nothing serious or game breaking, but it's enough to where you know where you are in the realm of polish. I'm not particularly upset about any of this though, as this game is completely, totally free. It's a nice little experience, and if anything, it's best to treat this as a demo for the next 4 games to see if you like the vibe of Fear to Fathom and want to pay $5 to experience the next one. Honestly, you can get pretty far in this series with just the $10 I initially planned on using for this video. Really, even if you aren't immediately in the position or mood to be paying money for games, at the very least give this episode a download and see if you want to buy the others maybe later. And now, for the low admission price of $5, we get Fears to Fathom Episode 2, Norwood HitchHike. This episode has us playing as a young convention goer who's strapped for cash and road trips out to all their favorite cons in their beater of a car. This results in you getting put into a little bit of a situation. Right off the bat, we're on the big boy version of Unity now, and there's new gameplay stuff like talking to people and going to the store. These are rather simplistic games from a mechanics side if you haven't picked up on that yet. Where Norwood HitchHike excels is in its slow, tense moments before the big climax of the episode, which is fairly impressive considering the expected playtime of this game is 40 minutes. Norwood HitchHike does an excellent job of making you painfully aware that your car is being held together by Bondo and vibes as you go down a road that has terrible visibility even if it wasn't dark. And then, of course, we're getting stranded out here. But that ends up being the least of our issues once we see our lodgings. Something I really appreciate about this is that this episode embraces the idea of horror in the mundane to its fullest. All the things that happen in this episode are totally plausible things that can happen to anyone if they get put in a situation like this. People come off as much creepier than they actually are. Coincidences or accidents can seem sinister, and sometimes the coffee creamer is a little spicy. They also add a feature where the game listens to your mic to see how well you can hide, which is a nice touch for the climax of this episode. So like I said earlier, and how the game clearly states when you select this episode, this game is meant to only take 40 minutes. Personally, I think it works here, as this scenario has very little fat to be trimmed from it. Horror is at its best when it's as short as possible, so that the audience has as little time as possible to acclimate to the setting and therefore be less scared of things. We might talk about length again later on, unfortunately. Also, this game is cheaper than basically any entree item at a drive-thru. Never mind the whole combo meal. I know we talked about the priciness of fast food these days, but has anyone else been able to effectively kick their fast food habits because it's just too damn pricey to the point where if you want to eat out, you may as well go to a restaurant and get like full service? Like, I might occasionally splurge on some breakfast jacks, as that was always my childhood go-to, but those were also 69 cents when I was a teenager. It's almost like 10 bucks now if I want to do 3 breakfast jacks without any sides or anything. Oh yeah, next game. And that leads to episode 3. The Carson House. This one makes it to the 1 hour mark, but it's still only $4.99. Again, you're home alone, but this time you're at someone else's home as you're house sitting for one of your dad's clients/friends. Again, we're staying strictly in the realm of the mundane here, but it does get a little bit surreal in the beginning as you briefly take a trip to the laundry dimension. But that's where the weird stuff kind of stops. There's weird stuff in the real world too, though. The kicker for this house-sitting gig is that the owner of the house you're watching is something of a media personality, more like local news than influencer. And while I'm pretty sure my own camera setup is a little nicer than this guy's, and maybe someday I'll use it again, the guy's real X factor for this house is that his office resembles essentially a panic room with Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria amounts of security cameras posted around the house. Heck, this guy's setup is better than that because this camera system is connected to the power grid, so it doesn't run out of juice. And all the cameras have night vision too. Surely a simple house-sitting job won't need something like this. So on top of the slow burn of the Fears to Fathom games that we're starting to expect, we've got some new gameplay elements to contend with. And no, not that. I'm trying to keep the $ green here. I'm talking about stuff like how there's level and scene changes beyond just linear stuff. There's an interactable computer that you can search the internet for stuff relevant to the plot, things like that. They're still hiding like in the last couple of games, but now you're gonna have to sneak away from your pursuer too, which is always nice. The last thing I'll talk about, and I have to be vague here as if I say too much it might ruin the experience for you, is that this episode in particular is great with misdirection, planting, and payoff. Red herrings are placed well enough to be easily mistaken for clues, and that makes for some good fake-out scares later on, and it keeps the tension high throughout the whole experience. Like, bravo, Rail. This is excellent spookies right here. There's also an extremely cursed cooking show, and I love it. I want more of it. I will get more of it. But first, it's time for beef. That's right, we're doing pot roast for our third meal prep this Indie Weed, and it's a surprisingly easy one, as essentially all you gotta do is prep the beef, prep the everything else, throw it into a crock pot, and then come back right at the end of the day to make your rice to go with it. First step, acquire the beef. You want cubed meat for stew, since pot roast is basically a stew. Plus, it's not the cheapest beef you can buy at $5 and change per pound. Sure, that comes out to around like 28 to 30 bucks per package here, but this makes a whopping 10 portions, and those are hefty portions. You might be able to get away with like maybe 12 or even more from the amount of beef we're doing here. For now, once the beef has been acquired, all we gotta do is spread the beef across a paper towel lined sheet pan, liberally sprinkle the salt all over it, and let that hang out in the fridge for about an hour to let the salt do salt things. Now let's take care of all the not beef stuff that goes into this pot roast. So what else is going into the pot roast is 1 large yellow onion, 1 stalk's worth of celery, a large potato, a big thing of mushrooms, or if you want to save space, one of the regular packages of mushrooms, and half a package of baby carrots, or maybe a whole package of like one of the small baby carrot bags if your store's got that. Dice your onion, chop up your potato into dice-sized cubes, chop the celery into about centimeter-sized ribs, cut the mushrooms however you like so that they just bake down good, and do nothing to the baby carrots. The carrots are in a way that by the time this is all done slow cooking, they will fall apart by themselves into perfectly sized chunks. So we've got a lot of stuff here, and we'll start by oiling a high-walled saucepan, letting the onions sweat a bit, and then adding in everything else. And don't worry if this looks a little full, it will cook down. Hey, look at that. I edited the video and it all cooked down. Honestly, you don't even really need to do this step if you're just feeling extremely lazy or just not using as much stuff, because this will also cook down inside the crock pot. Just be careful. You don't want to risk accidentally not having it cooked properly, but you're smart. You know what to do. Just take some not beef stuff out if it's overfull. Oh yeah, this is a crock pot recipe, by the way, if you haven't picked up on that yet. Crock pots are like comically cheap, like 30 to 40 bucks, and one of the most useful tools for meal planning out there. And honestly, I'd suggest getting a crock pot before you got anything like, say, an air fryer or a rice cooker or any like not microwave kitchen utensils. All right, beef should be all salted now. All we're gonna do is heat up a large pan and give the meat a little sear. You might have noticed that unlike most pot roast recipes, we aren't using any flour around the meat to thicken the eventual like roast of this pot roast, or wine to make a gravy out of with the veggies. This is meant to be a lean pot roast that's perfect for eating heartily without blowing your calorie budget for the day if that's the thing you do. All we're gonna do here is just put a smidge of oil in the pan, sear that meat for a bit till it's got a nice color on it. Oh, by the way, pro tip, do not wear red tinted sunglasses when trying to see how seared your meat is. It will cause problems. And then when everything's done, we're gonna dump it all into the crock pot. Now, I do a bit of meat, then season with spices, then veggies, then meat, spices, repeat. You get the idea. You don't need to add any liquids to this because there's already plenty in the beef and the veggies that will sort of make a broth of its own. Set that sucker on low for 8 to 10 hours and then go do something else for like the next 7 to 9. This stuff is basically done. We just have to wait it out. So once you're within an hour of the pot roast being done, that's a good time to make the rice. Rice is perfect for this pot roast because it absorbs the excess juices very well and is a simple, efficient source of carbs. We're making enough rice for 10 portions here, so that's 4 cups of the dry stuff to 8 cups of water for 20 minutes. Probably the easiest thing I have done all day. It's good to get the rice done and then portioned out about an hour from the pot roast finishing cooking, because you'll want the rice to have a chance to cool down after being cooked, as to not accidentally overcook it into mush by immediately dumping a hot pot roast onto the still piping hot rice. Oh hey, pot roast is done. All you gotta do now is stir it a bit with a fork to watch the beef and larger stuff like baby carrots naturally break apart, give it 15 to 20 minutes to rest and absorb some juices so it does not dry out, and then portion everything out. Like the last 2 times we've done, only put what you're gonna be able to consume within the next 48 hours into the fridge, and everything else goes into the freezer, cycling things into the fridge as you need. I cannot stress enough how easy this stuff is to do. In fact, I'm pretty sure the more observant of you have noticed a few key details in the last 3 videos we've done, like how I'm wearing the same outfit in all of them, or how you can sometimes see stuff from previous or future videos in other videos, or how, I don't know, let's say the salmon required the zest of 2 lemons and the juice of 1, but then conveniently I needed the juice of 1 lemon for the chicken and pasta. So I'm just gonna drop the bomb now if you somehow haven't figured this out. I did all 3 of these cooking segment meal preps at the same time. I would have done the 4th one for next week at the same time too, but I only have 1 crock pot. I started the day by prepping this pot roast, and then once it was in the crock pot and going, I started the chicken and pasta. And then, during the time it took for the chicken to cook on the pan, I was able to do the entirety of the salmon dish, because all I had to do there was throw the salmon in the oven once the quinoa's water was at a boil, and then toss the broccoli into the microwave between chicken flips. It wasn't even that hard to do. You can do this. All these recipes are available for free on the Patreon. Get at it. And with that, we've come to the installment that I originally planned to center this video around, and what I now believe to be the best of the Fears to Fathom series, Ironbark Lookout. Ironbark Lookout follows the story of a National Forest Service employee living out of an RV while he takes jobs as a fire watchman. You know, I never played Firewatch, but I'm just gonna assume it's also spooky like this. Ironbark Lookout builds on everything we have previously played in the series, and has some more immersive gameplay elements, which I'm gonna say for clarification, means stuff like having to log fog weather conditions regularly while you're in the tower watching for fires, and not stacking boxes or 0451. There's also even more scene changes and even better use of the darkness and flashlights as you're on a nature trail. There's not going to be much light after sundown, if any at all. The scene changes are great here for setting up what's going on, and between this and the last game, there's some great planting and payoff going on in the writing here. Look, I know it says these are submitted stories, but regardless of that, things still need to be adapted for a new medium. This game also ties the next one for being the longest at 2 hours and is also tied for priciest at $9.99. That's still a great price for what you're getting though. So on top of the isolation and the dark nights, there are even more scares to be had in Ironbark Lookout, including some pretty cheap jump scares. I'll admit they work in context for the setting with how dudes can get jumpy way out in the woods when you're not supposed to be coming into contact with anyone, but I'm willing to mostly forgive this because there are other kinds of scares in this episode and a good payoff for the plot. They're also spread out enough to where it's not annoying. Finally, the last thing worth noting about Ironbark Lookout is that there are now even more unhinged videos, and I love them all. Something else I'll take the time to talk about now, which spans across all these episodes, is despite being low fidelity graphics wise, these games can be quite scenic. I often noticed how nice a certain viewscape was and took it in for a bit of background footage when I knew nothing was coming after me at the moment. It's nice. So like I said earlier, I was only planning on doing this last episode before expanding the scope to all the games in this series, adding the first, second, and third games to Andy Wein's budget since that would still make it under $70. Well, I decided to say screw it and get the fifth and seemingly last game in this series, even if in the end that's gonna make me go a little bit over, as I've been able to keep it well under budget for the last 4 years I've done this, and I think I've earned the ability to go a buck and change over just this once, so I sprung for the most recently released episode 5, Woodbury Getaway. I kind of regret it now, as unfortunately after 4 short but solid games, Woodbury Getaway is, dare I say, a miss and possibly just streamer bait at this point. I'm not exactly sure what happened here, as based on the time between releases, this wasn't comparatively rushed, at least by the standards of the other releases in the series, but the best way to sum it up is that this installation does not feel like it needs to be 2 hours long. To give you the background, you play as one Sydney Harper, or Harp for short. Cindy's first horror experience is that she is renting a cabin with friends for the weekend, and unfortunately, one friend is running late, which means she's gonna have to be alone with the "where's my hug" guy. Yeah, that's definitely more horror for the ladies there, but don't sweat it, 90% of my audience. There's other kind of spookies here for you. For instance, the same "oh no, a guy jumped out of nowhere" jump scare that worked just barely in the last game because of the setting. Here, they happen way too close to one another and also just don't land very well. I know the last few games have excellent planning and payoff, but while you can see the clues as to what's really going on here retrospectively if you're smart and the red herrings are still all around you, it just doesn't work because the tension feels like it's in the wrong place, and frankly, there's some moments that just lose all the tension and spookiness that's been built up, like whatever they had, like having to grind at the fishing game for like 20 minutes until you get what you need for the next part of the story, which also doesn't help with the bloatedness of the game. I'm really not sure what happened here. This feels like a departure from the form of the last game, and kind of like a bunch of scares from the previous game were all mashed together to cobble together the events of this game, and it just doesn't land. The final chase just feels a little too similar to the previous ones. The jump scares, again, feel like they just were, oh, the last one had jump scares, so let's put some jump scares in here. Or perhaps they just didn't know how to add more scares during the lull of like getting into the cabin and getting settled in. It's a shame too, because all of these were great up until this one. I've also seen a lot of reports of bugs and game-breaking issues like falling off the map on the forums, but for the sake of transparency, I had no issues with this game whatsoever. In the end, we're still at a solid 4 out of 5 games that punched above their weight for spookies and 1 game that left more to be desired. At least Woodbury Getaway had a solid 10 minutes of those unhinged commercials, which that's a redeeming enough quality. I don't know what's next for Rail, as I understand this was supposed to be a limited run of games, but who knows. Maybe there'll be a season 2 of Fears to Fathom, as what's supposedly the 5th and final game still has the story submission email on it. I couldn't tell you for certain though. As of now, with Sonar Shock at $7.99, Dread Delusion at $19.99, and the total cost of all the Fears to Fathom games coming in at $29.96, that makes our total so far $57.94 for 7 different games. Next week, we'll go over the limit a bit at $71.93, if I can do my math right. But trust me, that extra buck and change over the limit is gonna be worth it for the next game. I think you know which one it's gonna be. Heck, if you want to stay under for this challenge, just don't get episode 5 of Fears to Fathom, and that'll put you at a tidy $61.94. You can't go wrong here, so let's sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it making spooky stories on the internet, adapting those spooky stories into spooky video games, or creating coloring books, what you do should never be called content. It is art. Content is a word that in recent years has become a means to take all your passions, skills, and aspirations and grind them up into a gray slop. A gray slop that has no other meaning in this world than to make a line go up for someone else's benefit. Your art in no way deserves that. Art is sacred. Art is a reflection of its creator by the very act of its creation, and in no way do you deserve to be ground up into slop. So get out there and fight against the contentification of everything by fighting for your art. Stay saucy, everyone. Saucy boy, hanging out on the backpack that I wear when I walk to the gym. There's all sorts of like pins and stuff on it, but he doesn't seem to mind because it has the smells. Oh, what? You don't want my pets because I just showered and therefore my smells have been temporarily removed? All you want is to sit? Like, he even, like, if I have the backpack the other way around, he will scream at me until I flip it over so we can sit on this. And yes, he's annoyed because I'm bothering his naps. He was just such a blissful little child before. I'm gonna pet you. Scritchy, scritchy. See? Just want to give you some scritches. If you're nice, I'll let you have the backpack. I'll just leave it out here so you can enjoy all the smells and textures you like. Can you be nice? I'll even let you wear my hat. You want to be a hat boy? I'll take that as a no.